evening. I'm Walter Cronkite. Tonight, I'm trying something new, a presentation I'm calling Their Final Say. From 1953 to 1957, I hosted the CBS program You Are There, which reenacted historical events in the form of a news report. My last line for these programs was, "What sort of a day was it? A day like all days, filled with those events that alter and illuminate our times, and you were there." I've also hosted It's News to Me, a game show based on news events. People have always been fascinated by the last words of others. Perhaps they hold a touch of wisdom, a final joke, or even a confirmation of who's getting what in the will. Farewell from the chief, politicians and heads of state. Whether uttered unintentionally or with full expectation of death, a person's last words are those that people will often remember and quote as if they somehow represent the core of who that person was. This is especially true of historical figures for whom final words humanize and add to their mythology. Sometimes profound, sometimes mundane. Here's a collection of famous last words. Founding brothers in the American Revolution, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson soured one on the other when they were opponents for president of the United States in 1800. Fortunately, they renewed their friendship by 1812. On July 3rd, 1826, Jefferson slipped into a coma and died just after noon the next day. His last words were, "No, doctor, nothing more." But those words have been embellished to, "This is the 4th of July." At the time of Jefferson's passing, Adams himself had lapsed into unconsciousness. He woke up about 5:30 that evening and uttered his last words, "Thomas Jefferson survives." That day was July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of Independence Day. John Quincy Adams, this is the end of Earth, but I am composed. Son of John Adams and the 6th president of the United States, he is the only ex-president to serve as a member of the House of Representatives. In 1846, he collapsed on the floor of the House with a stroke while delivering a speech and was carried to the Speaker's room where he died 2 days later. Andrew Johnson, my right side is paralyzed. I need no doctor. I can overcome my own troubles. A tailor from Tennessee who was chosen to run for vice president on Lincoln's reelection ticket in 1846. That day of inauguration, he imbibed more whiskey than he should have to counter the effects of a resident illness. He embarrassed his colleagues in the administration and was accused of habitual drunkenness. Less than 5 weeks later, he became president. He favored quick restoration of the seceded states to the Union without protecting the former slaves. This resulted in his impeachment by the House of Representatives in 1868, but he was acquitted by the Senate by 1 vote. After returning to Tennessee, he won re-election as a U.S. Senator in 1875. He died of a stroke soon thereafter without taking office. Help! It wasn't until the next century when Richard Milhous Nixon became the first president since Andrew Johnson to have an impeachment proceeding begun against him. Later, 2 other presidents, Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, also underwent similar proceedings, and both were, like Johnson, impeached, but then acquitted at the subsequent Senate trial. Nixon himself was not impeached, but the impeachment process against him was the only one to cause a president's departure from office. Nixon did receive some redemption and praise as an elder statesman. In 1994, he called out to his housekeeper as he suffered a stroke at his home in Park Ridge, New Jersey. he never regained consciousness. Winston Churchill, I'm bored with it all. And Lady Nancy Astor, am I dying or is it my birthday? Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill and Viscountess Nancy Witcher Langhorne Astor were English citizens who could have been Americans. Churchill was twice elected prime minister, and Astor was the first woman to be seated in the British Parliament. They were known for their vicious exchanges. Churchill is supposed to have told Lady Astor that having a woman in Parliament was like having one intrude on him in the bathroom. She replied, "You're not handsome enough to have such fears." Lady Astor is also said to have responded to a question from Churchill about what disguise he should wear to a masquerade ball by saying, "Why don't you come sober, Prime Minister?" In another recounted exchange, Lady Astor said to Churchill, "If you were my husband, I'd poison your tea." To which Churchill replied, "Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Now, let's talk about great thinkers. Human beings, no matter their thinking, generally approach death with trepidation. I'm about to take my last voyage, a great leap in the dark. Thomas Hobbes died from a stroke in 1679 at the age of 81 in Harwick Hall, which recently has been used as a location for Malfoy Manor in the final two installments of the Harry Potter films. The hall portrayed the headquarters for Lord Voldemort and the Death Eaters. Voltaire, now, my good man, this is no time for making enemies. That was his response when asked to renounce Satan. He believed in a God, but not one who was personally involved with people's lives. At his death, he was not allowed to be buried in a church because he did not believe in the Christian God. Voltaire was the nom de plume of François-Marie Arouet. A versatile and prolific writer, he wrote more than 20,000 letters and 2,000 books and pamphlets. Jean Cocteau, since the day of my birth, my death began its walk. It is walking towards me, not hurry. Cocteau made about 12 films in his career, all rich with symbolism and surreal imagery. Pablo Picasso, who made few film appearances, did appear in Cocteau's Testament of Orifice. Cocteau frequently associated with Picasso, Salvador Dali, and Man Ray. Karl Marx, last words are for fools who haven't said enough. Marx did not live to publish the planned second and third parts of his Das Kapital. They were completed from his notes and published after his death by his colleague Friedrich Engels. Because of the controversial nature of his writings, Marx became stateless and lived in exile with his wife and children in London for decades, where he continued to develop his theories and to publish his studies. He did most of his research in the British Museum reading room. Next, gallows humor. Whatever the words, they remain as the final memories of the offenders. Before they're executed, people have little control over their fate, but they do have the opportunity to share their last observations about the world, their death, or even their executioners. While strapped into an electric chair or tied to a noose or standing before a firing squad, the condemned have uttered one-liners that grabbed headlines and even made history books. There are funny, crazy, and of course, sad death row inmate last words. George Apple. Well, folks, you'll soon see a baked apple. In 1927, he was convicted of killing police lieutenant Charles J. Kimmer during a robbery. Apple claimed he was innocent, but a month before his execution, he signed a sworn confession to a different murder of which Daniel J. Graham had been convicted. Apple and Graham were set to be executed on the same day. After Apple's confession, Graham sought a new trial, but the appellate court decided the confession was not sufficient to grant Graham a new trial. New York Governor Alfred E. Smith rejected a last-minute request for clemency because Graham didn't have an alibi and must have been guilty. Both men were executed in the electric chair as scheduled at Sing Sing prison, just minutes apart. Apple's baked apple quote does bring to mind a quip credited to James Donald French in 1966. It was, "How's this for a headline? French fries." But the local newspaper, the Ada Weekly News, listed his last words as, "Everything's already been said." Poetic license? Robert Erskine Childers. Take a step forward, lads. It will be easier that way. Childers supported the IRA during the Irish War of Independence. He was executed in 1922 by a firing squad in Dublin. Before his execution, he shook hands with the firing squad. He also obtained promise from his then 16-year-old son, the future president of Ireland, Erskine Hamilton Childers, to seek out and shake the hand of every man who had signed his death sentence. Benito Mussolini. Shoot me in the chest. Born to a socialist father, Mussolini was named after leftist Mexican president Benito Juarez, also known as El Doce, the 40th prime minister of Italy, screamed these last words at his firing squad, and they obeyed. Earlier during his reign as prime minister, he was quoted as saying, "It's good to trust others, but not to do so is even better." After his execution, his corpse was strung upside down in a Milan, Italy square. Let's do it. Gary Gilmore had demanded his death penalty be by firing squad. Norman Mailer won the Pulitzer Prize for his novel based on Gilmore's life called The Executioner's Song. It was later made into a television crime film starring Tommy Lee Jones as Gary Gilmore. Mailer also wrote the movie script. Dan Wieden, founder of the ad agency Wieden Kennedy, claims he was inspired by Gilmore's last words when he was coming up with Nike's famous slogan, "Just do it," in 1988. Robert Alton Harris, you can be a king or a street sweeper, but everybody dances with the Grim Reaper. Convicted of abducting and brutally murdering two teenage boys, Harris was executed at the gas chamber in San Quentin in 1992. The first execution in California in 25 years. Next, players and performers. And all the men and women merely players from William Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 7. Whether realized at the time they are said or only in hindsight, everyone nearly expresses a word, phrase, or sentence that proves the last thing he or she ever says while alive. Sometimes profound, sometimes everyday. Here you will find a select collection of the last words spoken by famous actors and actresses of cinema, television, and stage. John Barrymore. Die, I should say not, dear fellow. No Barrymore would allow such a conventional thing to happen to him. John Barrymore, born John Sidney Blythe, was a member of the Drew and Barrymore theatrical families. His portrayal of Hamlet led him to be called the greatest living American Shakespearean actor. I should have never switched from scotch to martinis. Humphrey DeForest Bogart, nicknamed Bogey, was an American film star and stage actor. His appearances in classical Hollywood films have made him an American cultural icon. In 1999, the American Film Institute selected Bogart as the greatest male star of American cinema. A heavy smoker and drinker, Bogart died of esophageal cancer in 1957. Incidentally, his date of birth was December 25th, but it was changed by Warner Brothers Studios to January 23rd on their view that a man born on Christmas Day couldn't really be as villainous as he appeared to be on screen. Die, my dear? Why, that's the last thing I'll do. Julius Henry Groucho Marx was a master of quick wit and of America's greatest comedian. He made 13 feature films with his siblings, the Marx Brothers. He was also the host of the game show You Bet Your Life. His distinctive appearance, carried over from his days in vaudeville, included an exaggerated stoop posture, spectacles, cigar, along with thick grease paint, mustache, and eyebrows. These features resulted in the creation of one of the most recognizable and ubiquitous novelty disguises, the Groucho glasses. Source of his nickname, Groucho? He said that it was from Groucho the Monk, from the Knocko the Monk comic strip. Charlie Chaplin. Why not? It belongs to him. The silent film star said this in response to a priest at Chaplin's bedstead who said, "May the Lord have mercy on your soul." Sir Charles Spencer Chaplin was an English comedic actor, filmmaker, and composer who rose to fame in the era of silent film. He became a worldwide icon through his screen persona, the Tramp. And Chaplin is considered to be one of the most important figures in the film industry history. His career lasted for more than 75 years, from a childhood in the Victorian era until his death in 1977. Damn it, don't you dare ask God to help me. Joan Crawford allegedly uttered these words to her maid, who would start praying for her. Born Lucille Fay LeSueur, Crawford worked at a variety of menial jobs to support herself. As a good dancer, she made it to Hollywood, and shortly after arriving, she got her first bit part as a showgirl. She died of a heart attack in New York City, having disinherited her adopted daughter, Christina, who wrote a tell-all book called Mommy Dearest. In 1981, Faye Dunaway starred in a movie version of the book, which did well at the box office. Crawford is interred in the same mausoleum as fellow MGM star Judy Garland at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. I've had a hell of a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Errol Leslie Flynn was born in Battery Point, Tasmania, and was considered the natural successor to Douglas Fairbanks. He was known for his romantic swashbuckler roles and a reputation as a womanizer. His title role in The Adventures of Robin Hood was later named by the American Film Institute as the 18th greatest hero in American film history. Flynn described his ancestors as seafaring folk. Despite his claims, there is no evidence that he was descended from any of the Mutiny on the Bounty crew. Jackie Gleason, I always knew what I was doing. American actor and comedian John Herbert Gleason was known affectionately as the Great One. He's best remembered as bus driver Ralph Cramden in the television series The Honeymooners. During the 1950s and 60s, Gleason produced a series of best-selling mood music albums. His first album, Music for Lovers Only, still holds the record for the longest stay on the Billboard Top 10 charts, 153 weeks. He died of cancer at his home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, having smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day for most of his life. Surprised me. The radio and film star Bob Hope said this to his wife Dolores after she asked him where he wanted to be buried. Leslie Towns Hope was a British-American stand-up comedian, actor, and singer whose career spanned nearly 80 years. He starred in 54 feature films, including a series of 7 road musical comedy movies with Bing Crosby as Hope's top-billed partner. The song, Thanks for the Memory, was his signature tune. He helped establish modern American stand-up comedy. Between 1941 and 1991, he made 57 tours for the USO, entertaining active duty American military personnel around the world. In 1997, the United States Congress passed a bill that made Hope an honorary veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. He was one of the first users of cue cards. George Sanders, dear world, I'm leaving you because I'm bored. I feel I have lived long enough. This British actor wrote these words in a suicide note before taking his life in a Spanish hotel. Born George Henry Sanders in St. Petersburg, Russia, the British film and television actor's career spanned over 40 years. His heavy, upper-class English accent and smooth bass voice often led him to be cast as sophisticated but villainous characters. Also, authors and writers. When you're dedicated your words to your life, it's important to go out eloquently. Leo Tolstoy, but the peasants, how do the peasants die? Count Lev Leonovich Tolstoy was a Russian writer and a novelist born to an aristocratic Russian family. In the 1870s, he experienced a deep moral crisis and became a fervent Christian anarchist and pacifist. His ideas on nonviolence resistance had a profound impact on such pivotal 20th century figures as Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Tolstoy, in his final days, fled his mansion and tried to live amongst the people. Does anyone understand? James Augustine Aloysius Joyce was an Irish novelist and is best known for his novel Ulysses, which was about the happenings on Bloomsday, June 16th. Born in Dublin, he spent most of his adult life abroad, but wrote primarily about Dublin. Quote, I always write about Dublin because I can get to the heart of Dublin if I can get to the heart of all of the other cities. He died of a failed surgery in the presence of a wife and son. At 50, everyone has the face he deserves. Eric Arthur Blair is most commonly known by his pen name, George Orwell. The adjective Orwellian is part of the English language, along with such phrases as Big Brother and Thought Police. His gravestone bears the epitaph, here lies Eric Arthur Blair, born June 25th, 1903, died January 21st, 1950. There is no mention made on the gravestone of his more famous pen name, and he was only 46 years old when he died. Eugene O'Neill, I knew it. Born in a hotel room and God damn it, died in a hotel room. American playwright Eugene Gladstone O'Neill was born in a hotel, the Barrett House at Broadway and 43rd Street in New York City. That hotel no longer exists. And he died in room 401 of the Sheraton Hotel, now Boston University's Killichan Hall on Bay State Road in Boston. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature. His best-known work is Long Day's Journey into Night. O'Neill died of pneumonia. George Bernard Shaw, dying is easy. Comedy is hard. He died at 94 of a kidney infection. Shaw's expressed views were often controversial. He opposed vaccination and organized religion, as well as denouncing both sides of World War I. Later on, he spoke favorably of the dictatorships of the right and left, expressing admiration for both Mussolini and Stalin. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1925. He's regularly rated among British dramatists as the second only to Shakespeare. The word Shavian has entered the language as encapsulating Shaw's ideas and his means of expressing them. Dylan Thomas. I've had 18 straight whiskeys. I think that's the record. He had just returned from carousing at the White Horse Pub in New York City. The owner of the pub later commented that Thomas had really only drank about half that. He had spent most of his last days at his hotel Chelsea room drinking. He was only 39 years old. The British poet was immensely popular in both the US and the British Isles. His body was brought back to Wales for burial in the village churchyard at Larne. The procession to the church was filmed, and the wake took place at Brown's Hotel. Oscar Wilde, this wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it goes or I do. His parting words are made while lying in a Fleabag hotel on the left bank of the Seine. Oscar Fingal of Flattery Wills Wilde was an Irish poet and playwright known for his biting wit, flamboyant dress, and glittering conversational skill. Wilde became one of the best-known personalities of his day. He's best remembered for his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, and for his criminal conviction for gross indecency by consensual homosexual acts. He was sentenced to 2 years hard labor, the maximum penalty, from 1895 to 1897. And finally, unsung heroes. An unsung hero may be someone who acts bravely in battle without notice, or someone who sacrifices himself for the good of the group without regard for recognition. Michael Clinton Adcock, "Mama, fight for me. Don't let this happen to another soldier." He died of cancer and was considered to be the first death of Gulf War syndrome. Gulf War syndrome, or Gulf War illness, is a chronic and multi-symptomatic disorder affecting returning military veterans of the 1990-91 Persian Gulf War. A wide range of acute and chronic symptoms have been linked to it. Approximately 250,000 of the 697,000 U.S. veterans who served in that 1991 Gulf War are affected with enduring chronic multi-symptom illness, a condition with serious consequences. Todd Beamer, are you guys ready? Let's roll. And that's how he died, helping to lead a takeover by passengers on United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed on September 11th, 2001, near a remote strip mine area in Stony Creek, Somerset County, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Authorities say that the flight was thought to be headed for a second target in Washington, D.C., possibly the Capitol or the White House. Noor Inayat Khan. Noor was a published writer who later served as a resistance agent and became Britain's only Muslim war heroine. At Dachau concentration camp in September 1944, she faced the firing squad and uttered the single word, "Liberté." Noor is a common Arabic unisex name meaning the divine light. And that's the way it is. My last broadcast as the anchorman of the CBS Evening News was March 6th, 1981. And yes, I ended the broadcast with, "That's the way it is." For me, it is a moment which I'd long planned, but which nevertheless came with some sadness. After all, after almost 2 decades, you and I have been meeting like this, and I mean it, and I miss it. And that is my final say. Thank you for watching.